All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a very special and big guest on, big timer on YouTube here. Preston Stewart, a former Army officer, content creator, and the owner of what we would say the YouTube channel Preston Stewart, which covers open source intelligence and war stories and all sorts of great stuff. Preston, thanks for coming on.
Ethan, thanks so much for the invite, man. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely, me too. We were covering a little bit before we started the podcast what kind of titles we should have, or if we go down that route, like what do you do? Like it's hard to explain to family. You talk about, hey, yeah, it's hard to explain to my family. Like I'm you don't want to say YouTuber, like it's like a struggle almost. You're like, yeah, I make content for YouTube, but it like lessens the blow, a little bit. But I know how it is. Like as a cinematographer, filmmaker, we've dealt with that for like 20 years. In fact, if you become a filmmaker or like down that road, you have to like explain that you're not just like, oh, so you make videos? Is that what you do? I have to explain to everybody like what that entails. So, but thanks for coming on, and we'll just dive right in. Where'd you grow up, and how did you get yourself into the military?
Yeah. So let's see. Grew up Central Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, University of Illinois area there. I was in high school. I was a sophomore in high school on the 9/11, 2001, and that just hit home. So grandparents in the military, kind of grew up, aware of what the military was. But then that was kind of the big switch for me. Was 15 years old, 9/11 attacks, and just kind of started to look at the route of going into the military. And from college, then my parents kind of drew a hard line, and they said, if you're going to go into the military, you got to do college as well. So that kind of narrowed it in to like, all right, well, that means I'm not enlisting at 18, ROTC or a service academy, something like that. And I got really excited about West Point. Didn't really know what I was getting into there, but thought that looks like an interesting thing to do. So ended up going that route. And then after 4 years out there in New York, found my way into the field artillery for a couple of years on active duty.
Nice. So where were you stationed at then, active duty?
Fort Campbell. So you do the artillery stuff out at Fort Sill, but for my whole time on active was Fort Campbell, 101st Airborne.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So how was those active duty years? What years was that? So that would have been what, 2012 era, or what? Yeah. When did you graduate?
So 9 to 14. It was good, man. It was a fast tempo at that point, but that's also there's a benefit at West Point. You get to kind of choose where you go for your first duty station, kind of, sort of like They put you in a room, and I think it's changed a little bit now, but loosely based on class rank, you get to choose which unit you go to. So you go, Hawaii, that's off the board fast. And there might only be like 3 or 4 slots for Hawaii and 2 for Italy, but there's, 740 for, I'll call it Fort Hood, but Cavazos, right? Nobody wanted to go down there.
Yeah. So
you kind of get to choose where you want to go. And I wanted to go to the 101st. I'm a history nerd. Always, Band of Brothers, watched that the 78 times or whatever. And I knew the 101st was going back and forth at that point to Afghanistan. And that's what I wanted to do. I know you understand that feeling of, if you're going to be in the Army, you're going to be in the military, you want to do the stuff the military is doing in a time of war. So I was pumped to get to the 101st. They were, it was no joke, man. Those guys they're serious. It was humbling in a lot of ways.
Yeah. They're all was it Karehi and all that shit? Yeah, I just remember seeing that. So when I was a contractor, it was you guys and the Rakkasans slapped that symbol like everywhere. I was like running around different fobs in Afghanistan. It was like you guys spray paint that on like every single wall that you can. Right, but yeah, it's cool. Exactly. I totally get it. Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. So how was that like? Did you end up getting into Afghanistan, or how was that life like as an officer in those years?
Yeah, it was cool, man. I was a fire support officer for 2nd Battalion, 502nd Infantry, dog company there, part of the 2nd Brigade combat team. I got there while they were at JROTC. Got there while they were down in Louisiana. So essentially by the time I met the unit, we were going on block leave and heading down range in 2010 to southern Afghanistan as part of that surge. So that was my first kind of full time in the Army, was more deployed, really, like getting to see what the Army's like than stateside. The stateside experience was was out at Fort Sill learning artillery stuff. And then at Campbell, it was just pack up containers and go. And look, I like that. That was nice. That's the tempo is up there. You're doing your job. You get to be creative and try to figure out ways to problem solve this stuff. And the thing I liked about jumping into that role, you're second lieutenant, so like the most junior of the most junior, but there's kind of this assumption that you're going to be able to take on information and learn and be able to absorb it. And they throw so much at you, or maybe it was just a good unit and they did that. But like every day it was like 130% of my capacity to learn the stuff that was coming my way. And at the time it was exciting, hard to fall asleep at night and excited to get up in the morning and get going. And in retrospect, I think that was just such a good experience, to be overwhelmed in a good way and kind of trusted to, you're going to be overwhelmed and you're going to figure out your way forward and we're going to make this work. But that was a good stretch, man. Those good guys in Dog Company, really, really a solid group to be a part of down there.
That's awesome. So you guys did, once you got overseas, were you out of Bagram or you guys out of Kandahar, or where'd you guys work out of?
Yeah, so we were down in Kandahar for the surge in 2010. So we started at a place called Hausi Madad, which was a battalion-sized base, but essentially we turned a battalion AO into a brigade plus AO. So we moved from that battalion FOB out into a couple strong points and ended up kind of taking over some houses in areas that previously held by the Taliban. Afghans had long since moved away and weren't even farming down there anymore. We moved in, took over some of those houses, kind of built up strong points and lived down there for probably 6-7 months, and then bounced out west to a place called FOB Ramrod in Maiwan district. And we ran a month of air assaults to kind of wrap up, or about 45 days of air assaults, I think 4 or 5 different mission sets between 48 and 72 hours, fly out somewhere, sit on the objective for a day or two, fly back, and then another unit comes in. So it was a pretty go type deployment. I mean, it weren't really necessarily expecting in 2010. A lot of the guys that were with us were saying they hadn't lived like that out in the sticks and away from the internet and everything in a couple deployments. And that was, in 2010, you had guys that are junior guys that were on their 3rd or 4th at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that era. I mean, I know how that felt because I was Iraq 06, beginning of 06. So I went in 05. So I got right in before the surge in Iraq, pretty heavy. And then 07, 08 again, which was slower. And then after that, you're like, what's going on? Afghan kicks off in 08, 09. But there is that weird time frame, though. In Afghanistan, I'm sure the vets that are listening or anybody that doesn't know, there's like a really weird lull. And then it just picks up. And I was in Afghan from 08 to 09 for 10 months as a combat advisor. And I saw that ramp up. I mean, we were ramped up already. And then it was like, oh yeah, now here comes the rest of the army. And I came back again as a contractor in 2010. So I know the feeling that you guys had where it's like those guys were like, I don't know, we've just been sitting behind. Like if you were kind of joining that 07 frame and Iraq was your blinders, you're like, we're going to Iraq. Do that. It depends. If you got lucky, there was still some action going on, but there was a lot of downtime. There wasn't a ton of movement compared to like the earlier years. And then Afghan kicks off. And then it's like, if you're lucky to get on that rotation, then in time, and 2010, it was popping off for sure. I remember being there and guys were like, this war isn't going anywhere, and people trying to jump, trying to get into the fight in 2010. But yeah. I mean, it's, if guys, if you haven't, if you're like in that weird time frame right after Iraq, and it's starting to slow down, and then it was like right between the ramp up of Afghan. Yeah. It's like, you could have been downtime for like 4 years and wouldn't even known it. And then get thrown into the shit right in Afghanistan. That's awesome. And so you guys did that for, how long were you guys deployment? Did you guys do the 12 or 15 month pump or something like that?
We were 12. I'm, fortunately never had to do more than 12, but the minute we went over there, the rumor started that it was going to be shorter, right? Everybody's like, oh my God, we might be back in 9 months or 7 months and 10 months and all that. And we ended up, the entire brigade went home and they kept our battalion back to run those air assaults. So we got to watch everybody pack up, rip out with the 10th Mountain that was coming in, and then they sent us over to kind of, it was a weird deal. They'd run, essentially what they would do, very big picture is, so this was, we thought we were going home, but no, you're going to go 30 more days popping into areas you've never been before, which is dangerous in a place like Afghanistan. And the concept was interesting. I have no idea if it actually worked or not, but they would have special forces and or rangers going in, say night one, and it would kick up the hornet's nest somewhere where they had actionable intel. And then the same night they would exfil, we would move in, usually 2 companies worth of an air assault. So, you're talking 350 people with all the enablers, 300 some at least. And then we would be there, kind of a presence in that little area for 24, 48 hours. And then as we exfilled, a unit that had control of that battle space would push in on the ground to establish strong points. So it was like this kind of lightning type, just overwhelming in what were supposed to be Taliban hotspots. On paper, it sounds good. I don't know at all if it worked big picture. But that was kind of the last little run there.
Before we keep going with this podcast, I want to drop this week's discount code for 9line Apparel. We're not just a brand, we're a lifestyle that celebrates the spirit of freedom, courage, and American values. Go check out our gear, including hoodies, glassware flags, jackets, hats, patches, and much more. All material is ethically sourced, so every shirt you buy is free of slave labor. As a veteran-owned and operated company, we also take pride in giving back to those who've served. Your purchase helps us contribute to charitable initiatives supporting veterans and first responders. This episode's discount code is OSINT20 for 20% off 9line Apparel products. Oscar, Sierra, India, November, Tango, 20. Not 10, not 15, 20%. Not 25 because that's a bit excessive. So get over to the store and get yourself 20% off your next purchase. While you're at it, like, listen, and subscribe to the 9line Apparel podcast for future discount codes and more conversations with amazing guests like today. Now back to the podcast. That's I mean, it sounds exciting. It sounds fun. You guys are doing a bunch of air assaults.
But it was the timing too, because so the interesting thing here is there was competition to want to do the air assaults. Because we did a bunch, and our company did not do very many. There were some companies in our battalion that did 5 or 6, I think. And we thought, we're getting looked over. We want to be a part of that. You want to do the cool guy stuff. But by month 11, you don't want to do the cool guy stuff. By month 11, you just want to go home. I just want to go. I want to go home. I want to do that. No. I don't want to go to a new area where we don't know what the IEDs look like, and we're not familiar with the terrain and don't know anybody that lives there. So it was like, that was cool guy stuff a few months ago. Now it's like, oh my God, I don't want to do this again.
Yeah. So that was that. So then you guys, was it pretty kinetic then for you guys, or just like I said, you talk about the IEDs and whatnot? What was the experience like then in Helmand? Yeah. Or around Kandahar, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first morning there was kind of the wake up call. We wake up flew in the middle of the night, ripped out with 2-1 infantry out of Fort Lewis, I believe, and woke up to gunfire. Right along the Highway 1, Taliban had these strong points in the south. They'd shoot north, try to disrupt anything moving along that road. RPGs, small arms fire, and then these guys brought in Apaches and they had strikers and did their work. And it was pretty much daily small arms fire until the winter months came, and generally died down for the most part by about November. And then it was just, IEDs at baseline, but we could move around a little more when the vegetation was gone because it's very green down there. Strangely jungle-like in a sense, like very humid in some of these agricultural areas, and not mountainous, very flat, and lots and lots of IEDs. And then for the most part, November, December, January was mostly just finding IEDs and trying to get rid of them before the next fighting season. And then the Taliban came back probably mid-February. I think I went on leave in January. And when I came back in February, it was like 2 days later, we got our first small arms engagement of the year. And then it was back to every day, a couple times a day, until we headed out west. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I said, we were more in RC East, but I know RC South was pretty kinetic. So it's always interesting to hear guys' stories from the South and how different the tactics are. Because we didn't have to. There's few valleys with IEDs, but not as heavy as the South. The South was like almost like running into Iraq again. It was like, oh Jesus, they're like every fucking 100 feet. It was nuts, super dense with IEDs. Where we were, because I tell people about my experience, it's like, nah, man, we were one gun truck rolling for like 4 hours into into J-Bad Pass and right up the valley, and we never worried about an IED. But that was the AO that we were in. We also knew the next one over was getting hit with IEDs. So yeah, every valley was just different how they use their tactics and strategies. So you guys get back then after that deployment. What'd you do with your life after that then? What was the next step?
That wasn't necessarily the best stretch. Yeah, I
Yeah.
I'm single, no kids, no pets. So, I'm pumped. Got to save 12 months of money, no expenses. I didn't have a house or anything. So came back, moved into a townhouse. I was super excited about that. I'm a grown up now. Got my first flat screen TV, all that stuff. But that period of time in the 101st, you knew your next deployment before you even made it home. So we had our timeline to go back in May, and we were scheduled to come home in June. So 11 months later, we were heading back to Afghanistan. So as soon as we got home, I just kind of unwound a lot, ate way too much, drank way too much, and just kind of, it was a weird time because you see how much luck is involved, especially with IEDs. And just at some point you say, well, your number just runs out at some point. And, I was fortunate as I didn't step on nearly as many as a lot of our soldiers did. And guys throughout our company stepped on IEDs that just didn't go off. There were that many of them. But as an officer, I as a fire support officer, I was not going on anywhere near the number of patrols that our squad leaders were. My fire support, my fisters were, but I tended to be with company headquarters and wasn't pounding dirt as much as those guys. And you can see that it just wears thin at some point and your luck is up. So that was running through my head as soon as we came back, thinking like, oh, we're going to go do this again. How many more times do you have? And, that led to some, again, overeating, over drinking, overspending on everything I possibly could. And was really out of shape then for the next deployment in May, like way overweight. And, but then, went back over in May to a much calmer deployment. This time was advising in RC East out in N2KL. And it was pretty cush, especially compared to actually fighting in the South. It was officers and senior NCOs. We were at an Afghan brigade headquarters. I was helping them roll out their artillery, those big D-30 howitzers throughout.
I remember.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was terrifying. Seeing what they do with those, but so it was much more office based, much more coaching. So it was very, very different deployment. But yeah, that was the last one. And I only did two deployments.
Mm-hmm. Well, so then what was that, 2012 then that you were, so were you part of like the advising the Kandak, or said you were RC East? I mean, we're RC Central, some RC East, but yeah.
No, it was 1st Brigade, I think 1st Brigade, 203rd maybe. I can't remember, but it was SFAT was the term they were rolling out, right? And it changed, it was SFAT or SFAAT. And they were trying to transition from, because now they have like set units to do that. And it's like an actual job in the Army, right? This was the period of time where they were like, okay, it doesn't work to take an entire infantry battalion and have them do this. So they stripped us bare, and senior leaders deployed and the majority of the battalion stayed home. So I was on the battalion team as the battalion fire support officer. So it was essentially like the S1, the S2, the S3, the S4, S6, me, battalion commander, and a couple other guys. And then like the XO stayed home and ran the rest of the battalion. So it was probably like 15% of the unit deployed, but it was the entire head shed. So, that's not the group I like to spend a lot of time with, but that's the group that you're with at that point. So, it was, and then we were focused exclusively as a battalion headquarters. We focused on an Afghan brigade. We brought over companies that did the same thing. They brought their platoon leaders, a couple of platoon sergeants, and a company commander and a first sergeant, and they were focused then on the Afghan battalions. So it was kind of a trying to transition into that mentorship type thing. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exactly what I did in Afghanistan. I was Marine Corps, but we had the ETT advisor teams. Mm-hmm. They killed the program in 2010, but I had known of the Army doing the SFAB, and I think SFAB is still a thing, if I'm correct. In fact, at one point I was considered joining it, I think they're still around, and they do the advisor missions, and that was kind of like taking over especially when we were there, but that was because it was like they needed more people to just advise, or like, hey, we need to go into the valleys with these guys and whatnot. So it was kind of crazy seeing the hodgepodge of, like you said, they took your head shed, and you're sitting there with trying to teach the Afghans how to do fire sport. And
Yeah.
we did, at our level, we had our own companies, in charge of companies, and recon platoon myself. So I know the frustrations of trying to work with, the Afghans, but yeah, I mean, that was, I thought that was a cool double-edged sword mission. And you're dealing with a lot of, you're trying to push water uphill, but at the same point, like you're kind of a little bit tip of the spear, and you're on your own, your big boy rules. Like it's, or at least with us, it was, and that was, an apex for me to finish my career on, which I thought was a blast. But, I could see where it's frustrating though, if you're in the officer aspect, and I'm sure you guys had a lot of inshallah, we'll figure it out.
So we were
yeah, we'll figure out that fire mission. It's fine,
That's right. And it was interesting when you think about it, because, we're trying our best. We, the U.S. Army, the military, DOD, we're trying our best. But the concept that we did in 2010, where we're fighting alongside them, you couldn't do that much coaching, because like you still have to look for the IED, and I still have to call in air support when we get in a firefight. So like, how much coaching can you do when you're actively engaged with enemy forces? Like there's only so much mentorship you can provide in that context, because you still own the battle space. So there was a benefit in kind of stripping out our maneuver elements, essentially, to where all we could do, like we didn't have any platoons, any companies to move around. All we had were the Afghans. So that was our sole focus. I think the problem we had was none of us were trained to do that. We went through like a 2-week course to get ready. I'm not an expert in that, right? And so you can fumble your way through it, and it's probably better than nothing. But I think that was kind of the stepping stone for the Army to get where they are today. But you're right. Because it was so much planning, it was a lot of, we would come up with a plan, talk to the Afghans about the plan, and then Lord knows where that thing went. Like you couldn't tell them to do anything. And that's tough.
Yeah, no, I know how that was, especially with us on the ground. You had the guys that were wanting to get into it, and the guys, and sometimes, we had guys that had Russian tank kills under their belt. So you had like a wide range of like guys who didn't know what they're doing, that were either skimming money off the top, or you had the hardcore commanders that were like, I've been fighting the Russians and the Taliban and whatever Al Qaeda we're doing now. You know what I mean? Like they've been fighting for 30 years. They were running ammo cans to their dad in the Soviet era. So you're kind of like, all right, well, how the hell do I mentor this guy? You know what I mean? Like, I'm here to drop bomb. He's basically like, go drop bombs over there. Like, yeah, sounds great. And,
right, yeah.
But I know how frustrating that can be. Especially with, and then on the US side, like you said, you got 2 weeks of training. It's like the Marine Corps was like that too. They went from a very big workup package to, when I got there, it was solid. It was still 3 months. It was still good. Actually, I think I did I was there. I got there late, so it was like 2-month workup, which was still really good. But it's still like I always tell people, we're like, we were the TEMU, special forces team. Like, they're expecting you to do a special forces mission, however you want to spin it. This is an SF mission, and we're going to give you less training, less funds, less equipment, and you're going to do, and essentially do the same job, if not more. The SF teams that we were with, they were like, you guys are nuts. You're going out with one gun truck with like 3 guys, because SF teams roll deep. They roll their full ODA. They don't roll half and half or whatever, like what we were doing. So it was always this weird like give and take with the U.S. military. Like, oh, you guys can do it. You figure it out. Yeah, we only have Green Berets that do this. They're specialized, and we train them for 2 years. But you just go do the job. It's fine. Just on the job.
I mean,
training,
I think that was kind of a problem over the last 20 years of this war, right? Is we just kept saying, fine, we'll do it. We'll find a way to make it happen. And like, there's probably a decent argument in a lot of different scenarios where maybe the military should have pushed back and said, no, we're not going to find a way to make this work. That's not our mission set, or especially with the nation building type stuff. We've never been very good at that, and we took it on because you just do it, right? You're just like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. I don't have any specific examples here, but I do wonder at times if maybe we were too willing to just say, we'll be adapted, we'll be flexible, we'll find a way to make this work. And
yeah, my take on it was, and I've been saying this since 2008, it's harsh, but if you're going to run a puppet government, then, run a puppet government. At the end of the day, Like Britain was really good at it. Even they got into they got into their own Afghan wars back in 1892 and, the Afghan wars and whatnot. But I don't want to say the colonization, but they had governors that stayed in country for 20, 30 years, if you're going to nation build, then the government at the top better be pro US, better be, you better be integrating everything. I hate to say it, I won't say top down. We kind of have to, I was there for those years and they're just like, well, maybe the Afghan government will like us. Well, maybe if they're a little more warm to the US, I'm like, why are we even questioning this? If we're giving them billions of dollars a year to stand up their army to fight, prop their government up, prop their officials up, then whoever is at the top better be lock and step with whatever policy that we're putting in. I think it's a little bit harsher take, but it's like, yeah, if Karzai wasn't a friend, friendly, then knock him out, or not, you don't have to kill him or anything, but like get him out of power, throw somebody that is going to be our puppet. I think it's just like, if you want to win this, you want to do this, you have to, I think a lot of people too, they think of, especially during the evac, we were talking to a lot of guys on the ground. They're like, well, go pick up a weapon. We know there's plenty of guns around. You guys better start fighting. And I remember talking to my Afghans that didn't make it out, and they were just like, well, that's not like the culture, I'm like, if this is falling all around you and you can't get on that flight and that window's closing, then you better fight for it, And so it was kind of, why did the special forces units collapse, right away? Why did the brigade, the Afghan army, there were guys that wanted to fight, but the hire just gone. So it's like, they, I hate to say it, they, if you fought there, you were there, the culture. And it's, and I don't think some people want to be PC about it, but like they follow the strong man. You can strong arm, certain Arab cultures. You can, it's not polite to say, but you can. I mean, that's what we dealt with over what the Taliban did. They just retook Kabul, and there's way more people that are friendly to the U.S. than there are Taliban, but they can strong arm the people, and it's just tough, it's tough. They're not, there's guns and there's billions of dollars of weapons laying around and not one, it's like the Northern Alliance barely stays, the Northern, I think they're called the dang it, NRF, Northern Resistance Force. Yeah. Or front. God bless them. I think they're, but they've lost so much ground, and it's like, if the people aren't willing to fight, then you're kind of, it's tough, and it's not like they like the Taliban either. They're just like very independent tribal. And there's a lot of things that, by the way, we've been saying this for years. I've been saying since 2008, people are like, what happened? And you're like, well, I could have told you way back then the issues that we're going to come into now. And it's a generational gap too. I mean, like if you're going to do something like nation building, you're going to be there for 80 years, Japan, we dropped the nuke and we're still there, like Germany, we're still there and we're 80, 90 years on, so granted it's different. You're in a European theater, an Asian theater, there's big cultural differences there, but yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that was kind of the tough thing of I feel like that was a very political war, obviously, not as drastic as Vietnam, because Vietnam is very much like kinetic, losing a lot of people, but if it was like a Vietnam super light, we weren't losing people, but the corruption in politics was like through the roof and no one wanted to take responsibility. I think we both can discuss that till the cows come home is, generals will lose wars and they get promoted and you lose your night vision and you get thrown in Leavenworth, I mean, that's pretty, it's you ND with your rifle accidentally somewhere, you're gonna get your rank ripped off, and you can lose wars. And as a general or as officers, I hate to say it, not to shit on you guys, but right. You know what I mean. But seriously, it's like there's no consequence. There's well, I guess I'll go into my next. Like I think that's the frustration too that we ran into, and with generals and in general, it's like you guys aren't doing anything. You just like. No one's sticking around for more than a year. So who the hell cares? Like they're going to get there, they're going to get their ribbons, and then they're going to go fuck off into the next command, and you're an officer, how that is, or we're an officer where I didn't realize this until I joined the National Guard. So years later and being at division headquarters, like you learn how political it gets when you start trying to like climb that rank ladder. I'm sure you ran into it too. You're like, holy shit, I was working at division headquarters as like a staff sergeant, and like just, PSD but I was around the 2-star, the 1-stars, all the colonels, and dude, the amount of kind of backstabbing and, scuttlebutt and like, dude, maneuvers, it was like wild. Like, I was like, dude, this is some cutthroat shit, so That's my rant, I guess.
I mean, I don't know. There's
What's your opinion on that? Yeah.
Well, I got a couple thoughts. In terms of the Afghans not standing and fighting, there's a story I always like to tell. When we were there in 2012, Cap Najil was in maybe it was Logman, but anyways, little tiny outpost out in the middle of a valley, kind of off by itself. And there's a documentary of a National Guard unit in like 2008 getting shot up there every single day. There's always contact, and we were downgrading that base and pulling out. And we were there for like 4 months. We had an American unit there. We were back at the big base. The American unit there reported troops in contact probably once a day for these 4 months. Then we pulled out, and then there were no more troops in contact. We're like, that's crazy. We must have won the valley. Like, what happened? And what happened was the Taliban struck a deal with the local Afghan commander, and they just kind of a live and let live. We're like, oh, okay. So they just stopped. And you put yourself in their shoes. You're like, I guess I get it, right? Mm-hmm. What do you do with that? Like, who's wrong? For we're looking there saying like, no, go fight the Taliban, and they're thinking, but I got to live here. So if I can find a way to survive with those people here, like, I don't know how we find fault with that. We it's tough, but yeah. And then to your point with the generals not facing any repercussions, I think there's a real argument to be had that we should have left Afghanistan sooner because, quite frankly, the American people didn't care. And I don't even mean that as a knock. Like, we weren't paying attention to it anymore. And maybe that's telling. Maybe it wasn't very important to us at some point. Maybe that point was 2002. Maybe it was 2008. Maybe it was 2019. I don't know. But there was so little information coming out of that conflict. And we had our boys in harm's way, people dying over there every year until we withdrew. And there's a part of me that says, good, if we're not going to be getting the attention of people to focus on this at all, and you can go up and down, the war hadn't changed hardly at all. There was no clear strategy for a long time, no clear end state. And part of that is probably because the average voter, it's not on their top 10, top 20, top 50 things they're thinking about when they go to the ballot box. If it's that far down the list of what the American people are thinking about, I have a really hard time accepting that we put our sons and daughters in harm's way.
No, and I agree. And like, that's the thing too, is I mean, when I went over, my brother was slated to go in 2008. I had no idea what the hell was going on. Like, I told him he was going to be a boot. He was going to go into 2008. I was like, you'll never see any action. It was they called it the reinvasion of Helmand. It was in 2008. He was part of 1-6. It was nuts. It was wild. And then it comes back into the news. I didn't even know. And I remember telling friends I'm going in the end of 2008. And I'm like, I'm going. And then you start hearing stories of like guys that are in the Korengal and the RC East. Like, they're like, we've been kinetic for like 4 fucking years and no one knows about it. Like, no one. Like, you hear about the Italian, what is the army unit that's out of Italy? The fucking lucky bastards. They get to like 173rd. Yeah. You get to be infantry stationed in Italy, and then you get to go to Korengal and like see the most action ever. But like, no one knew that. No one knew that was happening. And I agree with you. And then when I went, my friends that were like, I had a friend, I told her, I was like, yeah, I'm going to Afghanistan. She goes, we're still there? Like, no one knew we were even in Afghanistan, let alone fighting. And we're the 9/11 generation. I was a freshman in high school when 9/11 happened. So this is the big event and moment in our history, but it's like, they didn't know and that was 7 years later, so you're like, well, why would someone know? And I agree with you. It's like one of those things where it's like, if you want to strategically, like, I think it was it's like a weird thing. Like, if you want a foothold in the Middle East, probably should have kept it. But at the same thing, no one had a plan, and it was always like, well, what's the plan? And no one can answer that. I think you can tell it's frustrating. Even with the Ukraine war, it's like, what's the plan? What's the plan? And, God bless the Ukrainian. We can definitely go into this too. Is like, because I support the Ukrainians, and obviously I was there and did docs on it. It's like, but what's the plan? Like, why is anybody like above a fucking captain can tell me a plan? Like, you know what I mean? Like, the enlisted can, I'm not, saying the enlisted are everything, but like, the enlisted can be like, well, I think we should do this and this. I think, but they don't make the decisions, so what's the plan? And I think that's frustrating for guys that have been fighting wars, have been, like yourself, myself, you read history, we fought wars, we knew what we should be doing, but we couldn't because of whatever, God knows, politics that are being made or decisions being made way above us. But then you keep seeing it play out, and you're like, well, okay, what is the end goal? Like what are we doing here? Because if you would have said, hey, we need to convert Afghanistan into the next Dubai, okay, at least that's a goal. At least you could, like, if a general came out and said we're gonna be here for 60 years and we got to do this, and this, and it's the long game. At least you gave me a goal. At least you can't be like, well, we're just counterinsurgency. How it kept saying that. Like, well, it's counterinsurgency. Well, what the fuck does that mean anymore? No, I agree with you. I think that is a frustration that a lot of guys feel. It's like, and if you're getting into the war and you have no end goal, then, don't be getting into the war. Also dropping the ball on, you can talk about this all day, I'm sure, hindsight's 2020, but there's also, I think, a lot of people that are not experts in these fields that are running decisions. And you're like, okay, you dropped the ball about 15 times here, that were pretty obvious to keep this, that would have been stabilizing, people talk about Iraq a lot, and you're like, well, they dropped the ball. Whoever wasn't, the bright idea to like dismantle the army, even though they were Saddam's army, but you probably should have done that. You opened it up for the, it's so, you can remove Saddam, but try to keep things in play, they're, and so you kind of make a lot of problems out of problems that shouldn't have been problems, So yeah, I agree with you. I think that's that frustration that I think obviously everybody feels. So you do that second pump, and then what's life like after that?
Bounced around a bit, man. That deployment, I made the decision to get out. So when I came home, I had about a year and a half left, active duty obligation. So it was a 5-year active obligation, wrapped that up. And then had met my now wife, I'm blind date, the first weekend we were allowed to leave base after that deployment. So came home, still probably not totally adjusted to life in the States, and met Megan, and made the decision to get out and moved with her. We got married, moved up to Michigan where she was finishing up medical school. And I just bounced around a couple jobs at that point. So in Michigan, I worked at Northwestern Mutual. Absolutely hated that start to finish. That was a mistake. For about 6 months there, then went to a tech company in Chicago. That was really enjoyable. I liked that. Solid group of guys there. Worked remote for them. We moved down to Texas because a bunch of my family moved down to Austin. So we went down there with them, just to be around family as we got ready to kind of expand our family. And then worked with my family for a little bit while we were down there in the commercial real estate space. And then middle of COVID, we're like, what we should do? Move halfway across the country, and went from Texas to Tennessee, bought this house we're in now in Murfreesboro, and started a little daycare in town.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
That's quite the journey. Starting a daycare, which is, I my kids are in daycare, so
there you go. Yeah.
I don't know how it is in Tennessee, but I'm sure you guys are doing well.
It's an interesting field, man. Yeah, I don't know. It's but as the daycare was getting up and running, I needed to be available because we didn't know what the day-to-day would look like, and I was helping with the admin and the marketing and stuff like that. So started making these videos online, and lucky enough, that kind of spiraled into where we are today. So my job coming up here is going to be help with that business. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination passionate about daycare. We just wanted to try to start a business of our own. And now I get to do this, talking to people like Ethan in the middle of the day about war stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, we're just hopping on Zoom calls in the middle of the day. Yeah. Riverside podcast in the middle of the day. No, it's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome, man. We had actually a daycare that was mom and pop owned. It was our first one, man. They were a banger. They're still like the best one. I mean, where we're now is really good, but they were like, there's only 2 of them. They're here, one like on our side of the river, and then you cross the river, it's Wisconsin. And they had like one over there, and they're mom and pop. You could tell, like, kind of like you, the husband like ran the admin. So we were talking with like the mom, or the owner was the wife, and then the dad too, and then their like 15-year-old daughter was like caretaker, also kind of admin, and it was great. And they bought like a little school, and it was phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal. And then we had to leave because we moved to a different city. But yeah, they were great. That's why it's like, and then we deal with daycares all the time. My son is got a little fever today, so we had to maneuver our schedule around that. But yeah, it's no, that's awesome. And yeah, hopping out. I mean, like, trying to get, it's like, it's that business mentality. You're like, hey man, you're a small business. We got to get the marketing out there. We got to do videos. We got to do this, all that. So you kind of jumped into that for the business. How did you evolve into then I'm going to start doing open source intelligence or opinions or, what's going on, in the war? What was that first leap like to be like, I'm going to be doing this, cause you do a lot, you do it, to step into that role of being a content creator on YouTube, and doing it quite often, and to staying up to date, what was that first step like? And then, you've grown it to over 800,000. I mean, that's incredible. What was your first jump like into that, or your first video? And then what kind of evolved even into the first video?
Yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time. I didn't have much social media at the time. And I was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. And always was talking about make content and about the things you love, and you never know what'll happen from it. So military history was going to be my intro there. And I downloaded the TikTok app because he kept saying, this is the thing. Pay attention to this. And I thought, this is great because I don't have it. I don't know anybody who's on it. So whatever I put out there, nobody I know is going to see it. This is okay. Perfect. So I started making a little military history content just because I love that stuff and was always interested in it. And nobody was doing that on TikTok, or at least I couldn't find any big accounts at the time back in 2020 that were doing that. There's a weird place on that app where it was like wide open. Like you could be the first person making cooking content on there and have like 6 million subs now because there just wasn't, but people would be on the app looking for that. So I was doing mostly military history or exclusively military history. And then the war in Ukraine started, and I've always been my college degrees, international relations and terrorism studies. I've tried to keep up with that. I'm interested in kind of global affairs. Never thought about content or being a writer or anything like that. I just thought it was like, some people keep up with the markets, others keep up with the sports team. I like keeping up with, how ISIS is evolving in Syria or something weird like that. And
I'm with you. I'm the same way. Yeah.
But the war kicked off in Ukraine, and all of a sudden there were a lot of people trying to understand simple things that I took for granted, like what is a tow missile? What is a javelin? What is artillery versus air defense? And I started making some videos just trying to explain some of those things so people could get an idea of what was happening in the conflict. Yeah, and it just kind of grew from explaining these things of military terms that were popping up on the news, and then let's explain what's happening on the front lines, and one thing after another. And it kind of sucks you in to a degree. People were very interested in that at the time, and I was fortunate to have enough of a platform and maybe have garnered a little bit of trust from folks to where they were taking in the content, and it just kind of went from there. That allowed me to spend more time focused on this stuff and consume more content myself, trying to understand what's happening. At the time, very much focused on Ukraine. That's spread out a bit more following October 7th, started spending more time looking at Israel and Gaza, now the dang Houthis down in Yemen, and trying to just stay up to date with all of that stuff. And it's kind of a way for me to learn. So I'm trying to take the information in and at the same time try to relay it in a way that, and this is something I struggle with and I'm thinking about every day, but try to relay it in a way that's easy to understand for somebody who's maybe coming in for the first time. But that's I'm a work in progress on that last part.
No, I totally get it. I mean, I think Ukraine war is the impetus for everybody within this community. The Afghan evac was like the match lighting, and then the Afghan or the Ukraine war was like really is when it took off. No, I know. I think, like I said, that especially those early days, how everybody got sucked into it. I mean, we never thought we would see it. I would say this, people, we never thought we'd ever see a conventional war to this scale ever kick off again. And now suddenly, you have the Ukrainian official visit Ukraine account telling, going on to Twitter and posting what place to hit a BMP in, where the air intake is for a Molotov cocktail. Also, how to build a Molotov cocktail. Also, where's the vulnerabilities on a T-72 tank. That was like amazing. Yeah. I remember like seeing that and it was like just buck wild. Like they're like, if you get a hold of an RPG, this is how you shoot it. And it's like on at the time, Twitter, it wasn't X. I don't think Musk had bought it yet. So it was like this crazy, like, information, they're just trying to like survive in those first few weeks, especially the first few days, and whatnot. So, yeah. So what kind of kept pushing you, you're on the TikTok side. What evolved you into the YouTube side then? Like, how did your TikTok account take off, or how did that kind of, we can kind of get into the depths a little bit of social media, what gets blocked, what gets banned, the struggles working on these platforms.
That blocking and banning was the impetus for YouTube. So I was making all these TikTok videos because, look, it's easy, man. For somebody, I have no background in audio or film. This stuff is all just patched together, and it's breaking regularly, and I don't know what I'm doing. I got to go to YouTube to figure out how to set something back up. So anything that you can just do with your phone, I was like, this is great. So I was only making short form content on TikTok. This is actually before Reels came out on Instagram, so I couldn't even cross post them very easily to Instagram. They would show up as a post, and there was no real traction there. But posts started getting taken down on TikTok. They've been through some different phases, but anything Nazi, they hated. So like you couldn't say, which is a challenge when I'm making a lot of content about World War II. So certainly, and I'm not talking about like glorifying or like anything like that, but just the mere mention of the German side in World War II could get your account banned. And I got frustrated because this kept happening, and I started uploading the videos to YouTube as shorts, more just as a, like, hey, if I'm making all this content, I at least want to have a repository where I can save it and it's not getting taken down. So I wasn't really paying much attention to YouTube, was just cross-posting the content over there. And then had a couple videos in that shorts algorithm just take off. And the account went from, 30 subscribers to a couple hundred to a couple thousand, and a couple shorts went viral, and, maybe I'll pay attention over here. And then as time went on, had some good kind of mentors in the space that talked about, really the focus should probably be on long form content. It's where you create you can get deeper. I mean, selfishly, I can get deeper into the content. Some of this stuff, it just doesn't fit 60 seconds, doesn't do it justice. But from a professional, from a business sense, it's also easier to establish. It's easier to establish more of a relationship with people. They think they feel like they know you, right? When they listen to even a 15 or 20 minute video compared to a 45-second TikTok, and that there was a lot of value in making longer form content. So I've been trying to kind of prioritize that over the last couple of years. But yeah, the initial push was TikTok kept banning me. It's like, enough of that. I'm going over here to this YouTube thing.
And YouTube, what challenge have you come across any challenges on YouTube?
Not the same. YouTube, by and large, is just a much better platform. They do a really good job. I've had issues where things get demonetized, which it's the nature of the beast. I'm talking about war and conflict, and sometimes YouTube really did not like anything showing destruction in Gaza. So just showing videos of like, hey, this entire block is gone, like rubble, that would get flagged really easily and demonetize the video, which that's not the end of the world. I would still publish it, but YouTube, whereas TikTok a lot of times might just take it down. So, it's hard to say that from a business perspective, you don't want anything to get demonetized at all. But it doesn't affect your channel. Like, it doesn't pull your channel down or restrict you or anything. So especially talking about some of these conflicts, there's times you're like, I have to show that thing that happened in Gaza. I'm going to show it, and the video is not going to get monetized, and that's just the nature of the beast. That's what today is going to be. I don't show any graphic violence. Try to never show incidents where people are killed or there's bodies or gore or anything like that. The nature of showing some of this footage at times, I've probably slipped up. There's probably been, like a body in the background or something. But YouTube does a really good job of screening that before you hit publish, and they can actually determine like this is good or it's not good. And it's a great feature of that platform compared with others. Like TikTok will say, just go for it, man, and we'll let you know. Maybe in a day, maybe in a week, maybe in a month, and I don't know. Maybe we're not going to like it, but like TikTok will let you upload something that 2 weeks later they'll come back and say, actually, this is so bad, we have to remove your entire account. Whereas YouTube will tell you that right out the gate for the most part and say, yeah, this is sketch. You can't do this. So there's some from the creator side, there's a lot of value in that because it's not all that clear cut. It's not as simple as, yeah, you shouldn't put up a video celebrating neo-Nazis. Like, okay, got it. But why do they look at this flag and think that there's something weird about it? It's like a Russian imperial flag. Why are they flagging it as, it's that kind of stuff. So anyways, YouTube has been a lot better in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I myself going down this road for the last few months, I've been picking up some momentum. So I've been really kind of being like, oh, okay, monetizations, when it comes to promotion, what can you promote? What, they don't like promotion. They don't like politics, like whatsoever, like even like in the littlest bit, but yeah, I haven't gotten the demonetized yet. I've gotten like restrictions where like you can't and I agree with you. It's like, you can't make money off of this. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. But at least they tell you kind of going out the gate, and they do like let you, was it like basically kind of self go through and be like, hey, tell us if this is, we're still going to check it, but it'll make our job easier if you say, hey, it contains this, and this, and you submit monetization, and you can go through it. And I mean, they do it for like every piece of video now. I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure you go through
it's
it.
Good.
I've done it with my shorts and everything. Like, oh yeah, this is good. And, and I get it. They're making money. Everyone's trying to get money. So it's like, it comes down to like, hey, if they're going to demonetize you, I know there's a lot of controversy over that, where it's like, even if they'll demonetize and take your money, but then the ad still gets ran, where it's like, they still get the money. So it's like this weird, like, you're like, all right, I get it, but at the same moment, you're kind of like, that's pretty shady. But
and I agree with you. I get it, man. Yeah. Like, yeah. I've learned Islamic State is a hard no. There's just, I've not found any scenario where I've talked to, I ran a couple interviews where it's just like this, me and a guy who studies Islamic State talking about their movement in Afghanistan, demonetized just based off of what we were talking about. And like, I get it, because what happens there, and this, but for the audience, is there's brands that say like, I don't want my Nike shoes popping up right after they're talking about this Islamic State terrorist attack. Like, we don't want to be anywhere near that. Just, there's enough other content. We just don't want to touch that. And I get it. So terrorism is one where if I'm putting up a group about Boko Haram, Islamic State, they're better with Hamas now because I think they're just used to it. But there's a couple where I just have to know going in, like, this is automatically going to be demonetized. No questions asked.
Yeah. And so then, as a small business owner and as a YouTuber, content creator, what are the ways around that for you, for people that are listening or guys that are in our space that are veterans going in, what's the challenges of growing an audience, but also say, sponsorship or, you have YouTube monetization, but, obviously for anybody that's been watching YouTube, they know that each video gets sponsored even within. So even if you're not even on YouTube getting monetized, you're still financially making money off of that. What's kind of the ways to go about that? I know it can be a hodgepodge. I'm kind of, but for the listeners, how does that, because we talk about like, oh, everything got demonetized, the money's taken away, but like, how do channels stay afloat? Can you kind of talk about that? Or, even like yourself, you have a really big channel. I mean, there's people going out there right now that are building, or maybe just want to know, but you're at 800 some thousand subscribers. That's obviously something that a sponsor would love to have as many eyes on their product as possible. How does that space kind of work?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have dabbled with like memberships and Patreon in the past. I never liked it. I just haven't found the right fit to do that. But I know that from a business perspective, it's a smart move. When I've done that, like a Patreon or something, I have always felt like I'm under delivering. And I just feel like a constant, you've got to do more. You've got to do more. And if somebody's giving $3 a month, I have that sitting on my shoulder saying you need to be doing more. And I hated that feeling. So eventually stopped. I only did that for a little while. But yeah, there's the YouTube AdSense, something similar on TikTok. And then there are sponsored videos. I've done, probably 5 or so on TikTok at all. About 5, I'd say, over like the last 4 or 5 years. And, I'm publishing 3 to 5 videos on TikTok a day. It's 1.2 million followers over there. It's a decent sized audience, and there's just not a lot of sponsors that are what I've found that are interested in short form, because it's very hard to convert from that. It's very hard to do an authentic placement in 60 seconds or less. Whereas in YouTube, you're just, you got 10 minutes, then you take a break, brought to you by ABC company, and then you move on. It's somewhat natural. We're used to watching commercials on TV, but you cannot take a break in a 60-second clip to pitch something for 3 seconds. It just doesn't fit. So I've done a couple there. So you just have to dedicate the whole video to it. So it needs to be something that fits, right? Like I'm not going to be able to make a video about a skincare product that fits in any way, shape, or form with the content. But there's certain ones that have over the last couple of years. YouTube, I work with an organization that helps source sponsorships for YouTube, where they do all the negotiating, because I hate that portion of it, and probably undervalue the cost of an integration and all of that. But a couple recurring. I think the most I've ever run in a month is probably like 5 ads. So not all of my videos are sponsored. I'll push out 30 to 50 YouTube videos a month. And there's, this month there's going to be 3 that are sponsored, for reference. I'm kind of torn on that. It's hard to, first off, it's a lot of extra work randomly to like record the segment, come up with the creative each time. That's not just reading off a plaque, because I don't want to insult the audience. So I want it to actually resonate with them, be something they'd be interested in, and also present it in a way that's genuine and that they, don't just automatically fast forward through. So that does take some brain energy, and I'm spending a lot of time just trying to put the content together. So I find myself almost getting frustrated with when the month comes around. It's like, oh, I've got these 3 brand videos I got to put together. Like it's taken away from the other stuff I want to do. Because then you'll send it off to the brand and they'll say, can you change this, that, and the other, which is what they're paying for and is what they deserve. And I get frustrated. And I don't voice that to them at all, but when I see the corrections come back, I'm like, oh my God, okay, fine. Totally appropriate criticism on their part. So I don't know. I'd like to probably do more short, sponsor at the beginning. Hey, this is brought to you by Benchmade, and then on with the video, stuff like that. That's a little more that fits. It's a little easier day to day rather than like one big video each month. But yeah, it's interesting, man. Navigating it day by day, kind of learn as we go.
No, it's always good to hear. Like I said, everyone's just different. I think everyone looks at like the big YouTubers, the big ones, and they're like, well, they can do it. They're making money off it. It's like, yeah, but that's a whole nother, field, like they're like, well, Joe Rogan made 100 million. I can also make millions of dollars off. I'm like, well, yes and no. You know what I mean? Like it's like, let's say it's a fight to get up there, but you got to build the audience. You got to build your trust, what's your lane? What do you do? Also what sponsors you're going to find, some people find rando sponsors and they just like, it just works well. You'd be like, really, that works? And they're just like, yeah, I'm killing it right now. And you're like, Jesus, but that's just kind of the name of the game, I guess you would say, and talking with some, have you ever talked with some of the sponsors? And it's kind of like a rando thing where, do they feel like, I feel like if you're, if you have the money as a brand, like it's almost like, I don't know, sky's the limit. How many YouTubers are out there? You know what I mean? What I'm saying? Have you ever talked to someone and be like, holy shit, yeah, man, we're finding this is great. We can throw our brand in front of hundreds of thousands of people, every day. Now, I got a buddy that's a social media manager as well. So, I mean, it's like they're building their platform, but just like, like people like you, or even guys that are in the $5-6 million ranges, or sorry, 5-6 million subs, translating that. But have you ever talked with them being like, yeah, this is a great time? Or is it just like, it's still a pain in our ass. We're spending money on marketing, we need to sell
brands. But the agency that I'm with talks about that regularly, where they say there's kind of 2 big challenges that they run into. And the first is explaining to a brand that you can run effective marketing on YouTube, and like just explaining like how this works and that there's a clickable link and all of that stuff. That's like getting the companies in the door to recognize that this is a space at all. And then the second one, they said the easiest sell is when it's a company that is already doing this and they've allocated a portion of their budget. They're just looking for the creators to tie in with. But you're right. It's an unlimited pool. And I've got a friend that was doing this recently where it was on TikTok, and they were paying small amounts to a ton of people, which is another, you can think about how the brands look at this. Mm-hmm. Like, let's say they've got $30,000 worth of budget. Are they going to put that into 2 great big creators that might get them 20 million views or something, whatever the number might be? Or are they going to spread that across 30,000 small creators, or, 3,000 small creators, and give them all, a couple $100 to be over the moon, and maybe one of those 300 videos goes viral, right? It's neither one of those is wrong. And we're seeing, from what I can tell, a lot of brands are they're constantly trying. Like, I think every brand is probably in search of like that one creator, that one influencer, whatever it might be, that just lines up perfectly and is a positive ROI quarter after quarter after quarter. Because, like, why not? Makes it easy, makes it simple. You just pump money in and get money out. But there's so many options now, and there's nothing wrong with, we're seeing brands go to smaller and smaller creators and offer brand deals, because why not?
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. And like, I've started to get approached, and it's so weird because, one, I'm like, is this legit?
Yeah.
Or you're like, oh, it is legit. And then it's like, oh, okay. You're now, like I said, I'm going to hit 10,000, subs this week.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so I'm like, awesome, cool. What, I'm sure, that's small potatoes, compared to a lot, but you're still like, all right, it's moving. But you're kind of like, what is this? Is it monetization? Are you guys, is it money, or are you giving me product? And then you kind of have to like go back and forth of like, okay, that's cool, man. I'm glad you gave me a, $800 for the product. That may not work for me. You know what I mean? I think some people are kind of like, oh, you get some, because I've talked with our mutual friend, Nick Laidlaw, and he's like, oh, sometimes they'll send you cool stuff. I'm like, that's awesome. I think that'd be great. But in the same point though, that doesn't, if you're doing like what I do, which I flag people out, I do this in person. That costs me money. Like I'm all out of pocket right now for everything I do, so you're kind of like, it's a different, that's great. I'm glad I got a $500 thing, or like a knife. Well, that doesn't do anything for me. It's like, I maybe I'll resell it. Thank you. But it's not, if you're giving me a hang up on the wall, it's like, well, why don't we try something different? Because I have to fly physically somebody out here, and whatnot. So, and then maintain and whatnot. So, and push my own marketing. So yeah, that's why I'm kind of curious, like I said, talking with you guys and being like, oh yeah, how does that maneuver? And, we were on, working with even other media companies, when clients ask me like, hey, what do you do to get this out? And I know a little bit, but it's always cool talking with you guys that are like, no, this is how, as a bigger creator, is what we do, or even as those companies is how we do it, or even as a social media man. Those are all jobs within themselves, within an industry. Like, yeah. I think sometimes brands come to like me and be like, so like, how do I get this out on social media, and how do we pay influencers, and how, it's like, dude, it's not in my wheelhouse. I'm the guy that directs and makes your project. I'm not a social media manager. I'm not a I don't even know what you call those, like brand marketing people that, get from them. I'm not even a creator. I just started. So I can't even, or a social media influencer. So I can't even tell you like on that side, because I have friends that are that, and they make great money on TikTok, or, people that I know. And I'm just like, and it's great for them. But I think it's just one of those things where you're like, dude, that's a whole nother job, like career, like to get to that point too. So, cause some people think you just start TikTok in like 5 months, you're like, oh yeah, I'm at that level, I'm getting spot. It's like, no, that's not how this works. And then some brands are just completely clueless, so it's just always like interesting to talk with people on how that goes. It's like said with you got a pretty big channel. So it's kind of like, all right, cool. What does that business side look like, and how, successful can that be? Is it sustainable? I appreciate the low cost, high yield, you're shooting videos in your house, in your studio, and it's like, awesome, dude, that's the best way to do it. People get a little bit into, oh, I got to build a studio, I got to get this camera, or we got to go big on all the videos. It's like, do what you can do, to make it work in those first, few months or even years before you take off, And then how do you, I guess in your work, how do you pick and choose your subjects? You're pumping out, except 50 odd some videos upwards a week. That's a lot, man. You're kicking out, 2 videos possibly a day, if not more. What's your workflow, and how do you just, how do you discover a subject? How do you work on it all the way to like import upload.
The subject discovery is help. We were talking about this. You know what? I don't remember if it was the start of this podcast or if it was before we hit record, but talking about staying passionate about something, you have to be able to do that to kind of keep doing this long term. And this is information I'm passionate about. So when I'm not recording, maybe I'm sitting in front of the TV at night or first thing, get up in the morning. This is the kind of stuff I'm checking. Like, all right, what happened with Ukraine overnight? Any movement on that ceasefire deal? What have we heard from Hamas in the last 24 hours? And I'm looking across Telegram and Twitter and YouTube and podcasts just to see like what has happened in the last 24 hours or so. But it's constant. So like that's the kind of stuff I'm checking on my phone when I'm out for a walk, right? And I pull out the phone and pull up Twitter real quick. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking at. It's not any other information. So it's always kind of right in front of me. Then in turn, I'm kind of segmented into a couple different areas. There's Ukraine, always keeping an eye out for what could make for a good video to update people about what's happening in Ukraine. Gaza, I'll say all of Israel's fronts at this point between the West Bank, Lebanon, and Gaza. Iran is becoming a big one. The Houthis is becoming a big one. And in the last few months, actually DOD in general, just because there's been a lot of stuff happening at DOD that we're not used to. This is a much more, maybe controversial is the way to put it, but like news forward DOD to where they're making announcements. There's a lot of change happening right now, and we're not used to that in an organization like DOD. So across those groupings, I generally each day see what's out there and try to grab at least two and then plug that into a YouTube video on its own. So like one will be about the Houthis and then another will be about Ukraine. And then after those videos are complete, after I've recorded those, I'll step aside and make 3-4 TikTok videos of kind of the sub bullets. So a 10-minute YouTube video might result in 3 short TikTok videos. But then, yeah, so it's the research here, some quick notes in a Word document, maybe pull up some videos that are going to be used to accompany, try to shoot just right here, sitting at the desk, and then immediately pull it into editing software, creating the thumbnail, and try to get the first one live by 10, 11, maybe noon, and then the second one going up at 3, 4, 5 o'clock. I switched over a couple months ago to try to push out more content, noticing that there's a line to walk where there has to be a certain level of quality, but there's also a lot of information that people are just looking to absorb. So, you don't want to put out junk, don't want to put out noise, but there is an insatiable appetite right now for content across the internet. And where I really saw this was with some political focused accounts on both the right and the left side of the aisle. They're putting out 5 to 10 YouTube videos a day. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to publish 10 YouTube videos, long form videos in a day. That's not what the platform tells you to do. And they're killing it. Like millions of views a day kind of thing. It doesn't make sense. And they'll have a video hit 3 million and the next one will be 26,000. And then they'll have a 740,000 in the middle there. And I thought, all right, well, let's see if that works in this space as well. You can't put out junk, but if you just put out more, go a little faster, expand the subjects a little bit, will people still be interested in it? And right now, the answer is yes, from what I can tell. But that's essentially the process.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So what are you using? Using Premiere Pro? Go nerd on you a little bit. Is he using
nobody
Resolve
knows what this is. Movavi.
Oh shit! All right, okay, all right.
Okay,
I see you.
It's the first one I got. It was reasonably priced. It was like $80 a year or something, and it's very simple. I'm not good at editing at all, so it was simple and it's fast. So like I know that there's much nicer, better, higher quality ones out there. But to me, it was like I know it works. I can get in and out of this thing quickly. Let's move on.
Mm-hmm. No, I get it. Hey, that's the workflow. That's the workflow. I got guys that use Resolve. I use a Premiere Pro. I'm a Premiere Pro guy. That's how I work fast. I know how to get into it. I know how to get out of it. And the thing of the ones you're talking about, like are those live stream? Because I feel like I don't know if that's physically possible to do 5, 10-minute edits and throw them. Maybe I'm wrong. Because it sounds like you're doing 2, which seems that's a lot of work. Are those like the talking heads when you're talking about, where it's basically like they just go live for like 20 minutes and then they come back on like an hour later and they're going live and they just give their, because I've seen those accounts of the political ones you're talking about where they do like 3 or 4, but it's like kind of like we're talking now. It's like, here's our graphic, our ad placement, the subject line, and then they just pull up videos and they just talk for 20 minutes and then they're out. Is that kind of the ones that you're talking about?
News reaction kind of stuff.
Yeah,
probably
almost.
The best way to put it. Yeah. It's not like,
I mean,
it's not like organic stories. It's not like Vox Media or something, right? It's not that degree of news. It's very, And you'll know, like, some of this stuff ends up being almost the exact same subject covered like 2 or 3 different ways. It's just a lot. They're just hammering the system with content.
Yeah. It's almost like I won't say live stream, but it almost like kind of like it's a live stream, but and they just, that's the video. And you're like, you're not even uploading. They're just going in. And again, that's if that's what you want to do, I think that's great. I'm it's I've done live streams with other podcasts, which is like super cool too. Some guys were like, cause I've gotten that same thing of like, hey, you should do a Patreon. You should do live stream. And I'm just like, you don't want to force it. Like you gotta love and have a good time with it. And sometimes that works for people. Like I always said, like if I had like a partner in the studio that I'm like, yeah, this is the guy we play off. Like you could make that work. You could, cause you have someone to play off of, or that's my thing. But then there's people that are just like you said, they throw up on the live stream. They're like, we're just going to talk shit 5 times a day for 15 minutes and boom, but then people look, man, if you're looking for updated on stuff, I mean, that's the way to do it. That's what
in the news space that works, I think. Yeah.
In the news space. Exactly. Yeah. But then again, man, we're talking about Johnny Harris, I think probably before we even started recording. The guy, they spend months and they do a video every week, but they're so front loaded. And they have a team. And now they have a team. I got like 4 or 5 guys working on graphics and editing, and so you gotta, and they murder. Every video murders at 2 million because it's super high quality, and there's a fan base there. Like I'm not a huge, like I think it's I watch because I'm like, as a film nerd, I'm like, dude, the editing's great, the graphics, the storytelling, like the subject matter is awesome, and you're just like. Like sometimes you watch it like, dude, if you got a 5-person crew and you're on monetization plus sponsors, they're making a killing. I got my first my first month being monetized. I haven't made a ton of money by any means, but I made a good month this month, and it's by any means it's not a lot. But I was like, this isn't going to happen. This is, that one episode is killing right now, and the clip's killing. Not even the episode did great.
There you go.
Clips are killing. But then my next one is like, no, it's not even like a fraction, So you're like, my wife's like, oh my God, is that what you're making this month? I was like, do not expect that well, first off, I can't even figure out how to like get my tax form to say anything correct. It's going to be a little back if you're on YouTube. Like for some reason, my tax form keeps getting kicked back. It's like if I'm putting I think I'm about to go with my social opposed to my LLC. Because for some reason, the LLC is not registering with them. And so I'm like, I don't know why. I don't know how I'm doing it wrong. Like I've done it a million times, but it just keeps getting kicked back. And I'm like, okay. And then it's like, and my account's not even linked yet, like to like a bank account, which I imagine is after that. So
got to get that sorted, man. Yeah.
I know exactly. Well, exactly. So it's like, I'm like, oh, all right. Like we're heading off to Scotland on Friday. So I'm kind of like, well, if I don't get paid this month, it'll move over to next month. It's not like they're going to take the money away from me, so they'll just be sitting there until I, guerrilla my way through how to unfuck the tax forms apparently. But yeah, it's like so I'm you kind of look at that and you're like, oh wow, but it's a give and take, and I think when people want to do it like you are doing it for business, it is kind of interesting to talk about how things work and don't work, and you watch some channels, there's like, oh, this is how you're gonna do it, I'm like, honestly, I think everyone just almost to the T. I feel like everyone has to figure that out. Like, dude, I'm a little bit in the podcast space, and like everyone's doing the Sean Ryan sit down in a fucking chair, and you're seeing it across the board. Is that the new style? Like, I thought about doing I could easily convert it in my studio to do that, but I'm like, well, is that what I want to do? And does it really give a shit? So. You gotta figure out what works. I feel like some people are like, well, if we make it, we sit down in chairs like Sean Ryan, we're gonna fucking take off in our, you know,
That's the
in our
key.
subs.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the key. That's what we do. You know, it's like, well, it's a trend. It might work. It might not, but you got to figure out what you're doing, you know, so, and it's like, you know, guys like you, they're like, hey, we're doing talking head cameras. Like this is, and that works great. And that, if that's what you're doing, that works for you, you know? You don't have to have like a giant studio to do a talking head, you know, but even though I'm sure you'd like it, you know,
I like what I've got going on here. The kitchen is right over here. Our living room is right over here. I've got it kind of blocked off. It's quick. I can get in here in the morning, start getting after it first thing, at night. If I need to wrap anything up after the kiddo's in bed, it's right here. I like it. I would not, if I came across a chunk of money for a studio nearby, I don't think I'd take it for that purpose. I think I can get more done my own way like this for now.
Yeah. No. And again, that's what works for you. You know, when I built my studio, I built it because we had an unfinished basement. So it was going to be my studio anyways, this 5th bedroom, but it definitely is my camera gear's in here, my editing bay, you know, and for people that have been here, hopefully you can come on, you'll see the bookshelves right off the side, and like, not when this is not you being used as a podcast table, it is being used as my like camera gear prep, you know, and like, and work and like whatever. If I'm not using my desktop, I'm here, you know, whatever. So yeah, I agree with you. It's like, you know, and I had guys, I was on Anti-Hero and I'm going on some other bigger ones here soon, hopefully. And, you know, they have a studio and they go in and, you know, and I told them, I was like, yeah, I built it in mine. They're like, stay that way. They're like, we had to shift, even though their studio looks the same, the backdrop. He's like, they went from somebody's house to a studio. He's just like, now we're spending all our money, all the money that we made on the studio. Now we have like a storefront almost. And then it's like, you're bringing people in, and now it has a nice vibe. That's cool. You know, you're having a cool vibe going in, but you know, if, you know, you're, you know, spending $3,000 on a space, you know, and for me, I'm just like, dude, yeah, it's funny when I bring guests on, they're like, you know, it's like a joke. I'm like, you know, one guy was like, oh, it's the Silence of the Lambs, you know, because we're like going down my basement, you know, and, you know, luckily I have a big vaulted ceiling, so it's not like some creepy low head basement, you know. And, but even then though, you know, if you look at it, you're like, well, the studio looks good, and yeah, I might get killed on my way out, but you know, yeah. But you know, it's it works, you know, it's in my basement. I literally, like, I'm here with you, I flip it on, I go, and I get done, I jump right back on to work. So, and I think that's for people out there wanting to do that, you know, is like I said, you know, a good kind of like, hey, just start doing it, and whatever works for you, you know. And then, you know, I guess we'll kind of wrap it up with that. What is your advice to either veterans trying to do the YouTube space, or people that are just thinking about going into what you're doing, or just in generalities, hopping on YouTube, you know, and creating a career essentially out of what you're doing?
Yeah, I would say what has been helpful for me is trial and error. I know a lot of folks that want to get into this space, and they're always working towards their first video or working towards their first post or whatever it might be. And look, nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to see the first one, just how it is. They're probably not going to see the first 5 or 10 or 20 even. It's fine. And the people that do, they're not going to go out of their way to say anything negative or like make fun of you. Just do you. I think where, you know, you're talking about all the different ways that people try to make this work, I think authenticity is becoming more and more important, which is why, you know, we don't need the fancy cameras and all the high-end edits. People are looking for just more regular, honest connections. So, you know, don't try to create a persona online. Just be yourself, because yourself is that's the most authentic you can be. But yeah, big picture, just start doing it. Because maybe it's not for you, and maybe you think it's going to be videos, but it ends up being audio, or maybe you think it's TikTok, but it ends up being Instagram. You don't know that until you start trying. So just get out there and tinker. You got nothing to lose. It's free. What you're, you know, this type of stuff here, making this content, just give it a shot. You owe it to yourself.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Well, where can people find your YouTube channel? Where can people find you on your socials?
Yeah, best place, Preston Stewart. Should be a relatively unique name, fortunately, but YouTube is Preston Stewart, TikTok is Preston Stewart, X, Instagram, all of those minor variations, like little underscores, but Preston Stewart, that's it. Find me there.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, brother.
Thanks so much for having me.